It's time to go on the record with WRAL News.
Our country's officials have been clear. Anti-Semitism is rising in the United States.
It's a community that deserves and desperately needs our support because they're getting hit from all sides.
Rapper Ye, formerly known as Kanye West, making anti-Semitic comments on social media and in interviews. Brooklyn Nets and former Duke basketball star Kyrie Irving tweeted a link to an anti-Semitic movie. And comedian Dave Chappelle also under fire for what people describe as an anti-Semitic portion of his Saturday Night Live monologue. Plus, here locally, hate-filled flyers shared in Raleigh neighborhoods. We dive into this troubling trend, explore why it's happening, and how to combat it.
Thank you for joining us for this week's On the Record. I am Chris Lovingood. To discuss the topic of rising anti-Semitism in the United States, I'm joined with Phil Brodsky. Phil is the director of the Jewish Federation of Raleigh-Cary. And Karen Clage also joins us. Karen is a retired North Carolina educator who is on the North Carolina Council on the Holocaust. I want to thank both of you here for joining us. So, I want to start with talking about local anti-Semitism being reported. WRAL just reported several cases this year where anti-Semitic flyers were spread in some neighborhoods. So what needs to happen to stop this kind of behavior? And we'll start with you, Phil.
First of all, thank you for covering this topic. We are seeing these flyers passed out almost monthly in different neighborhoods, especially in North Raleigh, close to where different Jewish institutions are. It's very disturbing, and I think one of the things that needs to happen is that anytime we fight bigotry, it's not just the Jewish community. Everybody needs to come together to fight it. So the Jewish Federation has been reaching out to local officials, law enforcement, community partners, as well as trying to pull the Jewish community together to speak out against this, make sure people know that it's happening, helping the Jewish community still feel proud to be Jewish right now when it can feel a little scary. And finally, being open and talking about it. The truth is so many people, especially people that hold anti-Semitic views, have never even met a Jew. So for us to be out there talking about it is one of the most important things.
They have this mindset, they haven't even met him before, and yet they create this idea of an enemy in their minds. So Karen, what's your take on this? What needs to happen with this?
Well, certainly education is really important, and thank you for having me on as well and speaking about this. And, as a teacher, I used to get comments when I would teach a Holocaust unit or I would teach an elective class, and my students would say, "Why are you doing this? Are you Jewish, Miss Clage?" And I'd say, "No, but this is a human story. It's not just a Jewish story. Hatred and racism go back 2,000 years plus, and lots of other hatreds and policies towards dehumanizing individuals came from anti-Semitism. So it's kind of the beginning where people started talking about us versus them. And we just feel like we have so many opportunities to be able to share with students and share with teachers this new curriculum that we're working on to help combat and have some difficult conversations.
I was up in Pittsburgh after the synagogue shooting happened up there, so we can see how that mindset of anti-Semitism can grow into something, into a physical act where people lose their lives, and that's why we're having this conversation right now. So when you have celebrities like Kanye West that are putting out these anti-Semitic comments, and even most recently Kyrie Irving linking an anti-Semitic documentary on Twitter, how does that strike you? Because you have these people that have an immense amount of influence with all these followers. How does it strike you knowing that they can easily put that message out there and many people might go, you know what, I agree because I typically agree with this person? We'll start with you with that, Karen.
Well, it's very difficult, and as a teacher, you're fighting that challenge every single day when your students come in and they all have cell phones and they have access to hearing all of this. And, we saw, I just spent a week in the Holocaust Museum with 24 North Carolina teachers to help them think about how they can bring these conversations back to their students in a safe way, because we want to take students safely in and safely out of these conversations. But how do you talk about religious anti-Semitism? How do you talk about racism in a broad context, right? And while you don't want to compare suffering, you don't want to compare incidents necessarily, you do look for parallel things, objectives and parallel ideas that they can try to put into their own life for today. But it is a struggle. It's a very difficult thing, and teachers and parents have a challenge to try to help steer their kids in not exposing them at least to some of this information.
You know, to education, the second segment of this program, we'll talk a lot more about that, but we'll stick with the aspect for right now in regards to celebrity influence. What is your take on these celebrities putting these ideas out there?
It's a major challenge in the digital age. Things can spread so quickly. Kanye West has more Instagram and Twitter followers than there are Jews in the entire world. And one of the things we've seen from both the incident with Ye and with Kyrie Irving is that it led to an action after Kanye tweeted out, a right-wing group spread a banner over the Los Angeles freeway that said Kanye was right about the Jews. And that's the same group that's passing out these anti-Semitic flyers across the country, including here in Raleigh. And with the Kyrie incident, after he tweeted the video, the movie, it became the #1 seller on Amazon. So these things are leading to actions that people are taking. It's spreading, and really it's a problem for the Jewish community, but anti-Semitism is often the canary in the coal mine. When you see people starting to talk up against the Jews or spreading hatred toward the Jewish community, it's usually filled with untruths and stereotypes and long-standing allegations, and that usually is a foundation that can spread and create an environment where it's okay to say terrible things about other communities as well.
It festers, it permeates, and it can create some dangerous situations. I do want to play a quick clip from Rabbi Eric Solomon with Beth Meyer Synagogue in Raleigh, and he and I basically talked about those anti-Semitic flyers that people were reporting to him and his take on what's been happening.
No one thinks it's the majority. It's a sliver. It's a sliver. But this sliver has been emboldened in recent times through challenges that they see, whether it's about the economic challenge or immigration challenges or whatever is going on. And this perception that the problem must be some group. And in this case, they're focusing on it must be the Jews.
Real quick before we go to break, why do you think that people are zeroing in on Jewish people as a problem right now? We'll start with you, Phil.
I wish I knew why. It's the oldest scapegoat in the book. The Jewish community's been around for thousands of years, and unfortunately so has anti-Semitism. And you've seen it evolve generation after generation. Whatever the science or philosophy of the day, it's been transmuted to end up saying, and the Jews are behind it, or the Jews are the problem. It just hasn't gone away. It's a scourge that's followed the Jewish people for, like I said, thousands of years. But the most important thing now is that we talk about it, that we don't feel alone, but that we have partners, education, bridge building, so that we can begin to know each other and understand there's common ground and get beyond these stereotypes that we might have in our minds about each other.
And you, Karen?
I would just say people fear what they don't know or who they don't know, and so it's easy. You know, we have propagandists, and we've had them that make images of what the enemy should be and what the enemy looks like, right? And if you're talking politically, all cultures and societies do this because you can't hurt, you can't go after someone that's a friend, right? But if it's an enemy, then it's easier to do that. And when you don't know anything about a community or a group of people, it's easy to just assume that what other people are saying is true.
And in order to shatter ignorance, education plays a key role, of course, in unraveling this hate. And I want to jump into that a little bit quickly, but after the break first. Welcome back. As we continue our discussion on anti-Semitism, FBI Director Christopher Wray recently said anti-Semitism makes up a majority of motivation in hate crimes in the United States.
Anti-Semitism and violence that comes out of it is a persistent and present fact. Numbers that we've seen, about 63% of religious hate crimes overall are motivated by anti-Semitism, and that's targeting a group that just makes up about 2.4% of the American population. So it's a community that deserves and desperately needs our support because they're getting hit from all sides.
And I want to focus on that number. Karen, when you hear 63% of religious hate crimes are motivated by anti-Semitism, how critical do you believe it that education is in unraveling that? That's jarring to hear.
It is. It's absolutely jarring. And the idea, of 63%, again, goes back to a very, very old Jewish stereotype that the Jewish people were the killers of Christ. And so, you know, it's hard to overcome deicide, right? The Catholic Church, with its Second Vatican Council in the 1960s, who refuted the idea that the Jews were the murderers of God or the murderers of Christ, helped. Because for a long time they had been living, Jewish people had been living under this huge stereotype, and like I said, so how do you get away from that? It's built into the systems in Eastern Europe. That prejudice, that anti-Semitism was just built in, and people immigrate, people come, and they bring their prejudices. During the Second World War, we had many in Roosevelt's cabinet that were anti-Semitic as well, and so it just doesn't go away. And it's much like racism against African Americans or racism against Native Americans and other groups. I mean, it's just built in and bred, and it's a really serious problem.
And your organization is working on trying to address this. You know, the North Carolina Council on Holocaust, you were charged with making courses of study for students in the state thanks to the Gisela Abramson Holocaust Education Act. So really quick, describe what that is and how this curriculum, how the development is going on it.
Gisela Abramson was one of the founding members of the North Carolina Council on the Holocaust. Her son Mike is the chair of the council, and for her, education and speaking to students and teachers was really important. So the bill was named after her. It was passed a year ago yesterday, and we are working on creating curriculum for teachers in middle grade, 6th through high school, 12th grade, in English and social studies, and in other courses. We may be able to incorporate in art into music, and we're making good progress. We're working collectively with the social studies and English consultants at the Department of Public Instruction. The council is also an official partner of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. And so our curriculum is being vetted by the museum and by DPI, and we are working very closely with teachers around the state. We would like to have them do some testing of our curriculum to make sure that before it rolls out that it's something that they can use and that we get that feedback. So we've been working really, really hard these last 6 months or so, and we are excited about the opportunity to help bring this and not just add something else to the teacher's plate, but we want to be able to make it so they can just simply work on this. This is a hard topic for a lot of teachers. They feel uncomfortable about it, or they don't feel like they know it, and so we have to take people where they are in their training and help them get the resources they need.
And just because they have the discomfort doesn't mean we shouldn't have these conversations.
Exactly.
Which, Phil, what your organization is doing, you know, in terms of outreach, educating people who might not be aware of what exactly all goes on in the Jewish community. So talk a little bit about what the Jewish Federation does, trying to educate people.
Yeah, the Jewish Federation represents the entire Jewish community here in Greater Raleigh and Wake County. It's about 20,000 people. And we care for the people in the Jewish community through our social services. We're trying to build a proud Jewish community that, even though we're a small minority, we can feel like we're part of something bigger. And we are very active to build bridges and fight against anti-Semitism and other hatred. So we're reaching out to other groups, building connections, building relationships with local government, talking to law enforcement and making sure that they know what's going on when there's flyers being passed out or swastikas are seen in different public spaces. And it's just so important we're having those conversations. The local officials here, thankfully, have been very supportive of us, and we've been able to stay in conversation. And then we also spend time getting to know other people. And one of our key events that we do, it's called an Inter-Community Seder. We invited this year over 20 different groups from different community backgrounds here in Raleigh. And for one day, we had a group where it felt like it was really representative of what Raleigh actually looks like. And we did the highlights of a traditional Passover Seder, like the 10 plagues. And then at smaller tables, we translated it. So we had different groups sitting together, and we would say, those were the 10 plagues. What's a plague each of our communities are facing now? So we got to know much more, not just about the Jewish tradition and the Jewish community here in Raleigh, but about everybody in the room. And when you do that, it builds common ground. You see that we have similar values. That starts to build trust. And when you can get to that level, then the possibilities of what you can do together, how you can advocate together, how you can be there for one another are transformative. And that's what it's really all about.
You're trying to dismantle the idea of the others when it comes to this. When I hear you talk about that, which sounds very powerful when you have it. You know, the most recent anti-Semitic discussions seem to be centered around celebrities focused on the extremist portion of Black Hebrew Israelites, specifically the subgroup of African Americans who believe that they are descendants of ancient Israelites and that Jews are supposedly liars and false worshipers of God. So what kind of conversations about this have you had with your organizations? And Karen, we'll start with you.
Well, really for that specifically, we have not delved too much into that conversation. We, for the North Carolina Council on the Holocaust, we really do a lot of focusing on the events of the Holocaust, certainly pre-war Jewish life, because it's important to know what was in order to know what was lost, right? So for us, we are really focused on making sure that our teachers have what they need to really focus in on that one. So honestly, I can't really speak to that as well.
What about you, Phil?
I've seen them in different cities. I know they're active here in the Raleigh area as well. I've gotten calls from community members to say that they've seen this and they're hearing disturbing things being said about the Jewish people. So it is happening locally. I think it's really an extremist part of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement that is virulently anti-Semitic, really saying the worst things about the Jewish people. It's one thing to say that I think my community has ties back to Israel or ancient Israelites. It's another thing, however, to deny the Jewish people's existence, which is what you just said that they're doing, that they're trying to say, you aren't actually the Jews, we are. They
say Jew-ish, almost like an insult in that regard when they say that.
Right, to say that y'all aren't actually the Jews. It's scary. It's something that we see on the far left, also when it comes to Israel, to say that Israel doesn't have the right to exist. That is an anti-Semitic statement. The same by saying, Jews, you aren't actually Jews here. You don't have the right to call yourselves that. It's just dehumanizing in many ways.
Removing your identity.
Yeah,
right.
And unfortunately, dehumanizing, taking away identity, it's not just talk, because you were in Pittsburgh, you saw what happened. I was in D.C. at the time. I remember exactly where I was. It's scary because the more this is out there, the more it's normalized, which is what everybody's worried about when it's on Twitter with celebrities or on TV, and people are watching these different videos now. Normalizing it can lead to much worse. And we've seen attacks against Jews walking down the street in New York City just because they look Jewish.
There's those pockets of the online area where you can't see where people are having these type of discussions. We'll jump back into this discussion a little bit more after the break. Thank you for staying with us. We do want to focus on moving beyond the hate of anti-Semitism. Phil, we want to start with you. So when you have the internet, social media, etc., this form of hate can easily fester. So what do you believe is the path forward during this digital scape as people can, again, just permeate these ideas online?
Well, the Jewish Federation signed on to a letter to Amazon asking them to add, to either take down the ability to purchase the movie that Kyrie Irving shared, or just add a note that said this film contains anti-Semitic language in it. So sometimes I think it's upon the platforms to offer some context for things. We've seen some of that start, especially around the elections and around all the COVID misinformation.
Fact-checking and stuff.
I think that's part of it. And I think the other part, for any community that's being affected and for allies of that community to speak up. It's not the time to hide that you're Jewish or that you care about the Jewish community. This is the time to be proud of it. Talk about why you care so much that you're Jewish, why I feel connected to the values, especially about trying to make the world a better place that's been instilled in me by my Judaism and my parents. The good things about it, we can't let people forget, and humanizing, like we've been talking about, putting that face on it. Social media, for all its issues, is also a great opportunity for us to do that. It is a platform, so the more that we can role model, speak up for our own community, for our friends, and for other communities. That is one of the powers that social media has. And moments like this, it's an important opportunity for us to do that.
What are your thoughts on that, Karen, trying to combat these ideas spreading online?
Well, like I said, for teachers, it is a challenge with the internet and the fact that they have to use the internet so much. And again, I was in the museum last week, and there were middle school students who were videotaping some of the difficult video images and films in the museum. And they weren't our students, but it was a concern enough that they were using that. We don't know if they were using that in a good way or if they were going to come back and put this on TikTok and that kind of thing. So that it's a challenge, and we want our students to realize there were many different roles within the Holocaust. There were victims, there were perpetrators, but there were allies, there were bystanders. And so if our students can figure out that maybe I can just be somebody's ally, right? I don't have to go out and parade for all of whatever, but I can make a difference maybe in somebody's life. And so those lessons when we work with students and teachers is, again, to help put a name with a face and to say you can do little things right now in your own community to help.
There are those small ways that they can help.
Small things, exactly.
You know, with our state leaders clearly serious about this, contributing money to combating anti-Semitism and educating these students, how far does money go? I mean, like, what else needs to be done beyond the dollar to try to help make this happen? Let's start with you, Phil.
Certainly helps. I'm so thankful that the state passed the Giselda Abramson Holocaust Education Bill to make it a priority in the classrooms. That's going to go a long way. I've heard from parents that their kids have been harassed via social media platforms about being Jewish. So money can't solve everything, but having educated teachers, having educated newscasters and politicians and law enforcement about what's going on so that they know how to respond and they can understand when something is being motivated and is a religious hate crime or hatred toward the Jewish community. That's going to really help people know that it's not okay, that this is Jew hatred, it's not normal, it's not how we should be talking. And, you know, it really helps to build up that infrastructure to do it, but we have to also look at education, bridge building, and make sure we know each other.
The fight doesn't stop here. Phil Brodsky, thank you so much for joining us. Karen Klage, thank you so much for joining us. And we know this conversation is not going to stop just here. It's going to keep on being had. And we want to thank you for joining us for this very important discussion. If you have something to say about this discussion for On the Record, you can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/WRAL. You can also email us your comments, your questions, or your criticisms on the record at WRAL.com. Thank you so much for joining us.